Investigators say a man who killed at least 15 people when he drove into a crowd celebrating New Year in New Orleans may not have acted alone. More than 35 others were injured and the suspect was killed in the gun battle with police. The FBI has identified the man as a 42-year-old US citizen, and a flag of the so-called Islamic State was found in the pickup he was driving.
Barely a few hours into the new year, police in New Orleans responded to a mass casualty event where they said the perpetrator drove around barricades trying to run over as many people as he could before opening fire on officers.
Last night, we had over 300 officers out here. And because of the intentional mindset of this perpetrator who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
The incident took place in the French Quarter of New Orleans around 3:15 in the morning along Bourbon Street. It's known as a top destination for New Year's Eve parties. Nearby buildings were evacuated, and officials said the attacker died during the shootout with police. He was identified as a 42-year-old US-born citizen from Texas.
At this time, we cannot go into details about the subject's history. What I can tell you that the person was an Army veteran. We believe he was honorary discharged, but we're working through this process, figuring out all this information.
What I'm asking at this time are prayers for those who've lost their lives in the city of New Orleans due to this tragedy.
A visitor from Michigan said he was lucky to have avoided the street due to heavy crowds.
Very good.
Were you surprised whenever you heard all this?
Shocked, yeah, this morning. Yeah, my phone blew up this morning. Hey, are you okay? But yeah, we were out of here and I didn't see any of it.
Authorities blocked off the area where the FBI found several suspected explosive devices. They're investigating the incident as an act of terrorism.
Now, a few moments ago, the Mayor of New Orleans expressed her condolences to the victims' families.
First and foremost, I want to express my deepest condolences to the families and loved ones that were impacted by this tragedy on Bourbon Street and in the heart of the city of New Orleans. My priority will continue to be to ensure that victims that remain on Bourbon Street now will be serviced and removed as soon as possible. But as stated, the FBI is in charge of this investigation.
All right, let's bring in DW correspondent Benjamin Alvarez Gruber at this moment. Ben, authorities in New Orleans are saying they don't think the perpetrator acted alone. How have they come to that conclusion?
That's right. They reviewed a video showing 3 men and a woman placing an IED, so an improvised explosive device, in connection with this terrorist attack in New Orleans, French Quarter. And this could explain why officials at this news conference earlier today said that they are hunting down for additional suspects and do not believe that the driver of this pickup truck acted alone. FBI Houston in Texas said in a news statement that they are currently conducting law enforcement activity in the northern part of the city, and records indicate that that's the area that was cordoned off, was a recent address of the suspect in the New Orleans attack. And it explains also why law enforcement, why police have been asking people who have any information to share it with them, if it's images, if it's videos, or if they have information about this suspect.
OK, so you've given us the broad perspective of the scene. What do we know so far about the man who drove the pickup truck into the crowd, Ben?
So the information that the FBI shared is that this 42-year-old U.S. citizen from Texas is a U.S. Army veteran that was driving this Ford pickup truck, which appears to have been rented. That's the information that we're getting. It has a Texas license plate on it. The FBI also said that due to this ISIS flag being found in this vehicle, authorities are now trying to determine the suspect's association and affiliation with this terrorist organization, and that's where they're looking directly into this information. There are, of course, as it happens after this attacks, a lot of rumors that are being spread online, but we're still waiting for the authorities to come up with more information about those motives that led him and probably those who supported him to commit this attack on the first day of this new year.
College football is a major part of the American culture, Ben, particularly in the South, and the Sugar Bowl, an annual college football game, a particularly big one. Is it right that that's now been postponed?
It has been postponed for 24 hours, and that also explains why so many were celebrating New Year's Eve in New Orleans. It's quite common. It's worldwide known for many to go to New Orleans, to this beautiful city, and especially to the French Quarter, where the celebration, also where this terrorist attack occurred. But this game was postponed 24 hours. It's a tradition that happens. Student American football that happens there every year, and that's also why authorities stress that the area surrounding the stadium, where this game is scheduled to take place tomorrow at 3, so after lunch, is still expected to go ahead, and that the area of the arena and the surrounding area is safe.
And before we go, Ben, what's been the reaction from political leaders in Washington?
So there's not much going on in Washington right now. Many are taking days off before new Congress comes into power on January 3rd. President Biden reacted quite quickly from Wilmington. He then flew to Camp David. He thanked law enforcement agencies and said that he told his crew from Homeland Security, his team, he told also to the National Security Council from the FBI that he's been in touch with them and also with the authorities, local authorities. He thanked them for the quick response, and he said that they will work with help from them to get to the bottom of what happened as quickly as possible. And President-elect Donald Trump, that will return to the White House in only a couple of days, said that his administration will support the city as they investigate and recover from this act of pure evil.
Benjamin Alvarez Gruber, thank you. All right, let's speak now to security expert Hans-Jakob Schindler from the Counter Terrorism Project. Good to have you with us. US officials have said the suspect did not act alone. They also say they have found a flag of the so-called Islamic State in the pickup truck he was driving. Do we take clues or cues at face value like those?
Look, I mean, this is very early days in the investigation, and of course they are now going into the background of this and possibly the other perpetrators that they're still hunting to see whether this is really a IS organized or IS-inspired attack. Obviously, having a vehicle is a known terrorist attack. We just had one in Magdeburg, sadly. But before Magdeburg, it was really the hallmark of the Islamic State. In Nice, in Berlin, tragically, 8 years ago at the Christmas market. So it is a classic IS methodology. It had an IS flag. So the clues are definitely pointing into the direction of the Islamic State, which has demonstrated heightened activities, not only in Europe, but also in the US in the last year.
You talk about the flag and the methodology being both present in some ways. How big a threat is the so-called Islamic State to the US as it stands?
It's been a growing threat. I mean, we had in 2023 and in 2024 a unprecedented large number of arrested and successful IS-inspired or organized attacks in Europe. And as it always is the case, it first hits Europe and then hits the United States. IS globally has really been steadily growing since the withdrawal of international troops from Afghanistan in 2021 and the withdrawal of the Western troops from West Africa, where IS is growing tremendously since 2022. And now we have Syria as a potential other area where IS could expand. And so it's natural that if the pressure on the group in its core areas is lower, that it reverts to its priority list. And on the very top of the priority list is attacks against the West, in particular the United States and Europe.
So on to the timing, I guess, Hans-Jakob. You say it was coming. Is another terrorist group behind this attack? Why would they attack, if IS is behind this attack, rather, why now? Why now inside the US?
Terrorism is always a function of opportunity and capability. So obviously, this cell was ready to do this attack. They had IED skills. If this is really a connected incident, the IEDs in the truck. But also there was the opportunity. There was New Year's Eve. Many people on Bourbon Street, predictably many people on Bourbon Street, and a changeover in the barriers to new, more modern barriers, which very obviously left a gap, which also presented the opportunity to do the attack now. So he achieved what he wanted to achieve, is of course absolute media coverage and terror.
Is it surprising, should we be surprised, that the suspect is a 42-year-old US-born Army veteran?
It's not that surprising. Ever so often, it's not a particular large group, but ever so often you have former military men in extremist groups, more in right-wing extremist groups than in Islamist extremist groups. But being a former member of the military does not exclude you from radicalizing yourself. So we had incidents on January 6th, of course, in the right-wing spectrum. We had a couple of army veterans among Al-Qaeda in the past. So it has happened. It's not usual, but it's not very surprising.
And government officials now are naturally going to face questions, as they always do in these situations. Can such attacks be stopped?
Look, again, as in Magdeburg, there was a problem with the physical barriers. There were physical barriers. They were changed over to new stainless steel barriers that left a temporary gap. For whatever reason, the perpetrator knew about that gap, drove around the not yet fully installed new barriers and into the crowd. Obviously, questions need to be asked why the date to get this done was the Super Bowl, which is in a couple of months, and not necessarily the New Year's Eve, where it was clear that a lot of people would also be on Bourbon Street. So there were, security concepts in place, and you can see large amounts of policemen that were in that area at that time. But again, there was a gap in the physical barriers, and that needs to be examined, why that gap was allowed to exist on a day where many people were expected to be on Bourbon Street pretty much all night.
Counter terrorism expert Hans-Jakob Schindler, thank you.
Thank you.